So I've been trying to figure out how you introduce a new podcast. I started one more than 10 years ago, and at the time, I think I just turned on a microphone and started talking. Introduced myself so I could try that. I'm Mark Fonseca Rendeiro. Hi. Some of you know me from Citizen Reporter, from Source Code Berlin, from so many podcasts over more than a decade, but some of you don't. So to the new people, hello, I make podcasts. To the old people, no offense, old, we're all young at heart, but welcome back. Welcome to a new initiative. This is Realities Podcast, or The Realities Podcast. I'm not quite sure if the has any room whenever I say the name, but you know what I mean. This is a new podcast carrying on the tradition of listening to people about what drives them, why they do what they do, and what they've seen over the course of their lives, of their work, of their pursuing a passion. And to start this podcast, I decided to try something new, a live podcast. This was recorded, today's program was recorded earlier this month at Studio Bar in Amsterdam. And it's a conversation, an interview with C.Y. Chong, author of Life on Planet WWF. Many of you may know it as the international organization, one of the leading organizations into animal and nature conservation. C.Y. Chong joins us to talk about his career, his new book, things he's observed and learned. And that is, in essence, the theme of this program. Why you do what you do, how we do what we do, and what can be learned from it. I'm always a fan of history and learning from the past, learning from the present, to not repeat mistakes and to make the world a better place, no matter how small or large the measures that you're taking. So let's get to the live podcast, and I hope you enjoy it, and I'd love to hear back from you via the website and other channels. Okay, let's go.
In those days, and I must have been, 15 or 16, and 3 houses from my house. One day I said, "Oh, we have visitors today. This is a nice Porsche." "That's my cousin," she says. "What does he do?" He's a chartered accountant. I said, "Oh, that's the job for me."
A chartered accountant?
Yes.
Yeah. So you decided, I'm going to be a really cool accountant.
That was actually a mistake, but too late now.
Yeah.
When I finished my studies in the UK, it's when I met Françoise, my wife, was here, and I wanted to buy a washing machine. We were so badly paid, I needed hire purchase. So I thought, well, hire purchase means you pay by installment, yeah? So I thought, well, 5 years of studies and hire purchase to buy a washing machine, time to change country. So we went back to Malaysia. That's actually what happened. Yeah? And there I worked for a big US company. The whole idea was, as much money as possible, and afterwards, let's see what happens.
And in that time, did it work out? Did this dream of making as much money as possible, having maybe even a dryer with your washing machine?
We had a dryer, a car, servants, and we liked it. Well, I liked it anyway. But many Europeans didn't like it because what they say is, you open the window in the morning, they say this is a nice sunny day. 1 year later, they then say, "Oh, another bloody sunny day." So that's why we then came back to Europe for the 4 seasons.
And so at that time, you're still, in terms of working in the corporate sector, it's still a place where you felt comfortable.
Exactly. Because the whole idea was to make money. I had only one interest, which is money. And that's basically what happened. And I worked for a big US company in Geneva, and actually I liked it very much. It was very boring, but we were all very well paid. So in life you can't have everything. Well, I was at this very rich company, doing very well. We had 35% growth rates. And we were so rich, money was like nothing, We had private jets, and we had boat rides for the smallest thing. One example, one day my boss says, "We're hiring the boat in Geneva, for our office. for a party.
As you do.
So I said, well, that's good, but that boat cost $50,000. How many clients? I said, no clients, this is office party. You know? So at this office party, and when the party was finished, every man coming down the gangway from the boat was given a bunch of roses for the wife at home. Every woman had a nice Bordeaux for the man at home. You know? So this is how rich that company was. Then the growth rate went from 35 to 20%, which is still very good, but the company couldn't cope. So I would have drinks with friends in the retail industry. They say, oh, 2% is excellent. What are you talking about? Yeah. So I said, well, we are just spoiled. So we were actually firing people. And then one day I said to my boss, why don't you also fire higher level people? Well, my idea is you actually slow down, start paying away the cash. I've been there 10 plus years. And maybe I better get some money before the money is all gone. You know? That's how I actually asked to be fired.
What did your boss say when you suggest firing you?
He asked me, what did I have for lunch?
Yeah.
You know, he says, too much wine? I said, no, you know, but it was a good lunch. You know?
But so what were you thinking? This is a boring job, but then what? I mean...
Well, the idea is one must change jobs once in a while. And if you change jobs while you're being paid, as you know, like playing Monopoly, when you pass the goal, you get $100. You might as well change jobs while the money is still there. So anyway, the boss didn't say yes. He didn't say, let me think about it. And I had no news for 1 year. Then I got a phone call one Friday afternoon. Do you still want it? He said. I said, yes. Are you sure? I said, certainly not sure, but give it to me. Yeah. And that's how I left. And when I left, actually, I now have big sympathy for people who actually are actually really fired. Because I asked to be fired, I repeated yes, I got myself paid, and when I actually said yes, I felt rejection. You know, human reaction is actually very bizarre, actually. So, at least my reaction was bizarre. Yeah? So, suddenly I found I could sort of retire for quite a while. Yeah. Not forever, but for a while since I was paid. And in fact, I found that after a month or two, I was thoroughly bored. So to all the young people here, the message is, don't think about too much free time. You know?
Don't retire young.
Right, I was thoroughly bored. And I used to find on the Friday evenings, friends would get very excited because, oh, weekend is here, isn't it lovely? But for me, Sunday, Monday, Friday, all the same. You know? So it was actually very, very boring. Well, it was summertime. I was bored. And in those days, I was not thinking of sustainability. You know? I have to confess. So I was driving a big black Jaguar, very polluting, 4-seater car for one person. And I was driving past the WWF office in Chong, Switzerland. That's where it's actually founded, you know. And then I saw two flags blowing in the wind. One was a Swiss flag, the other one was a panda flag. Right. So then I stopped my car, I took a paper out, and I wrote there, WWF ?
What do you know at that time about them?
Very little.
Question mark.
Very little.
Yeah.
This was in 1991. And my image in those days of WWF was a little shop near the Geneva railway station. Windows not very clean, you know, and a few panda toys in the window. Yeah. And I remember an old National Geographic magazine with Prince Philip in Africa, fireplace, and they all sit around a campfire. You know? So this was my image of WWF.
And you thought, that's the life for me.
I thought that could be interesting as a life. You know? So I put this note into my pocket and I went home. Then when I went back, I emptied my pockets and I saw this WWF thing. So I then wrote to WWF, like, dear sirs, if you have something, maybe we can have a deal, you know. So then they called me, I went to see them. And I remember this interview forever. I parked my Jaguar, I walked in, and behind boxes, you know, I mean, cardboard boxes, 2 meters high, like a little wall, and there was my interview committee. You know, 4 of them chatting with me. So after 1 hour of chatting, basically they said, so nice chat, thanks, but no thanks, you're too expensive, and I left the place.
Yeah, you're too expensive.
Well,
I've been told that.
compared to my corporate days, So I thought that was the end of it.
Right.
A month later, I got another phone call. They're still too expensive, but why don't you come back? So I went back. We now have another better job for you. Maybe you could be interested. And I then said, okay, let me try for 1 year. I said, I didn't say that, but I thought that, I said for 1 year, maximum 2 years. And I ended up 22 years there. So the warning to all of you is don't go anywhere near unless you have time.
But you pull in there, first of all, in a Jaguar. Now, I don't know if anyone's involved in the manufacturing of Jaguars, but it's not exactly the environmental symbol. Are you seen at these interviews as friend or foe? I mean...
At the group interview, they didn't know what car I was driving.
Oh, right. That's key.
Yeah. Right? And for the first interview, I went in Francois' car, which was a Volkswagen, which was okay in those days.
Clean emissions.
So that was the first interview. For the last interview, I had to see Hannah. Hannah is a German who was a Deputy Director General. He was my last guy before the interview was finished. And when I went there, I then said, nice to meet you and all that. At the end, he then said, when can you start? I then said, Monday. But before I start, I have two confessions. I said to Hannah. So he then said, what are these two? He said, number one, I got my own private company, running investment funds for family, which I like to carry on. Hannah says, no problem, because we are in sustainability, this is banking, right? Mm-hmm. So that's fine. Then I said, yeah, but second confession, I have a Jaguar, I said to Hannah. So Hannah then leaned forward, and then said, I saw, and no catalyzer on top. See you Monday morning, he said. And that's how I started.
And so, what was the title of the job when you went into WWF?
He was a finance director.
The reason I ask is, were you someone in a position where you were going to make big changes and people knew it?
Whether they knew it, I don't know, but I did changes after I arrived. And to give an example, so Monday morning came, I drove my Jaguar to the car park. And the building is such that you have the building this way and the car park in front, so all the officers on this side can look onto the car park. In 1991, most of the cars there were very old cars. Today they are very nice cars in the car park. So
it was an NGO.
Yeah. But it was NGO, but in the sense of very ecological in 1991. So there you have imagined this dark blue shining Jaguar arriving in the car park, right? And coming from the corporate, I was very bashful. You just, in the US companies, you just say what you think. So I drove my car, I parked my car, and as I walked towards the building, I passed some very strange-looking electric cars with plastic windows and wooden seats, right? And then as I went upstairs, I asked where's the finance department, and I was shown the whole area of finance, and there was one area where there's a common finance room, with about 8 people in there. As soon as I walked in that first day in the morning, one of my team members stood up. He was a pretty tall guy, and he didn't look at me, he looked at the other colleagues. And he says, where in the world are we coming to? Hiring people who come to work in Jaguars, he says. So that was my welcome. But that wasn't all, Mark. I then shook everybody's hand, but not this chap.
Right.
And then I then said, well, where is my office? I have to remember I came from US corporations, And, your office is the one next door. So then I was shown a corridor, like this kind of corridor. One door, then the next door after that, but not so wide, this is luxurious, half this corridor. So as you go to this corridor, past the first door, on the left you have a wall. The other door there, and on the right a little cubicle with a window, my office. So whole of 6 meters. So that was my second shock. First the hello, then my office. So So I sat down and I cleaned my desk. And then I sat down. And after I sat down, within 5 minutes, 2 people walked from here to there. Then another guy walked from there to here. Half an hour later, the guy who greeted me so well also went in 3 times. So I said, how am I going to work in a place like this, right? Yeah. So I got up and I learned from the Americans, do first, apologize later. Yeah. So I got up, I know you're American, right?
No, I never learned these things. I left very young. Do first, apologize later.
Yeah. So I got up, I closed the second door and then I locked it. So I sat down and to wait for what happened next. Then this guy who greeted me so well, again he came in and he bumped that door. And then he looked at me very angrily. Who closed this door? So I said, I did. Then the guy stomped out again. So I then said, look, how are we going to work in a place like this, you know? Yeah. So then I called Hannah, the guy who interviewed me in the Jaguar. And can I see you, Hannah? I said, yes, come over. And then I walked over to Hannah, who had a nice office, not like my stupid box, yeah? So, what can I do for you? I just said, look, Hannah, this is what happened. So today is either my first day or my last day. He then said, hang on a minute. And Hannah is a deputy. He then picked up the phone to call Charles, who was the Director General in those days. And I didn't hear a thing. I just said, okay, and then said, then he put the phone down. So Hannah, what did Charles say? To congratulate you, we should have fired him a long time ago. No, so I fired the guy.
I'm thinking you're making a lot of enemies in your first days. Yes. You've said that. Yes.
But this is survival instinct, is it either you or I, right? So this is realities of life. Yeah? And anyway, I was a peaceful person arriving to work. I walk upstairs, I get insulted and all that, you know. So
true.
Yeah.
They pushed you. I see it. You said that in the first few years at WWF, you rarely saw an animal.
True.
What were you busy with that you could never see an animal? What was it that they really wanted you to do?
Everything was actually in a big mess. It was in a big mess. In the finance department, if you go up there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody was there. You know, everybody went home. This is what I was told.
Yeah.
And
5 o'clock?
Yeah, 4 o'clock, you know. Yeah. Compared to my corporate days, you leave home at 6:30. My boss says, oh, middle of the afternoon, you're going off, you know. So there's the other comparison. So there's a big difference there. I mean, not nowadays, but that was the case before. And eventually, I let the people go one by one. And they all left either by themselves or you can't push them all out as in one go as well. And things then gradually change. And that's why it kept me very busy for 2 years. To give an example of the mentality, leaving home from home at 4 is one example.
Yes.
The other example is when I fired this guy on a Monday, Tuesday, I was called to go to a meeting by my secretary. So I said, which meeting? He said, well, because the staff wants to talk to you. And the minute I walked in, they all looked at me and one of them says, we want to know why you fired so-and-so without asking us first. Mm-hmm. You know, you see? So this is like unions and French unions and call it what you want, you know? So.
Yes. Well, you're coming with a more heavy-handed approach. This is a more democratic office, apparently.
True, yeah.
They wanted to vote on who leaves, and
true.
You saw otherwise.
If they wanted to vote, I'll be out too.
Yes, that's right.
So that's the problem.
They're trying to stop you.
Yes.
But I'm curious, from the larger organization, what was changing? I mean, I've noticed even the name, maybe that's just cosmetic, but back in the US, I think it's still World Wildlife Federation. And in Europe, it's now Worldwide Fund for Nature, if I got it right. Did something change along with this name over the last 20 years?
But when it started, the whole idea was to save wildlife.
Right.
So the name was the World Wildlife Fund. You know, wildlife is the key, and fund because the idea is to get in money to finance projects, hence the word fund. Then people realize you cannot save wildlife if you don't look after the protected areas. So you have, if a place where the animals live are not protected, wildlife cannot be saved. Then they realize you can't protect the areas if you don't have regulations and laws that makes the protected areas safe. So then you go from wildlife to protected areas to regulations, CO2 emissions and stuff like that. So therefore, the name then changed from World Wildlife Fund to Worldwide Fund for Nature. And in Netherlands, something W Nature Fonds, WNF it goes. However, the people in the US and Canada, they like to keep the World Wildlife name. So now we have two names running, but the initials are the same.
Yeah.
Then when I was working there was often a confusion. Like once I was on the plane and this man says to me, "Oh, my 10-year-old son really likes the WWF." Then I realized you talk about the wrestlers.
Yes, I figured as much. That was the only WWF in my childhood.
And often there's this kind of confusion. But the best confusion I had, Mark, was one day I got a letter addressed to the World Wine Federation.
Ooh. Hulk Hogan?
That's okay, right?
Wrestling joke. Yeah, so there was this confusion, especially for non-North Americans. You had this World Wrestling Federation, which was professional wrestling, and it was quite famous, WWF. And you had the World Wildlife Fund, which adults knew about. And over the years, actually, the wrestling people have let go of the name. Actually, they were pushed.
There were a lot of lawsuits.
Yeah.
A lot of lawsuits, back and forth. So in the end, they changed to the World Wrestling Entertainment.
Yeah, yes, they are, and they're still around.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, but so brand names aside, I got the feeling, and you got to see a lot of that, and maybe we'll talk about that in the second half, that while you're there making the changes and reorganization, this organization is also changing how they do things in the world. I mean, and you just laid out some of that when it comes to it becomes more about laws, the actual regulations of the place. That's a much harder or complex job anyway.
True. So things actually have evolved a lot. Because in 1991, one example is fundraising. In 1991, all the money mostly came from individuals, normal people like all of us. And if money came from governments, people were already frowning. This is in 1991, or in the 1990s. And I used to say it doesn't make sense because governments have the money from taxes, and taxes comes from corporations or from individuals who work in corporations, no other place. So then gradually it went from, then it's okay to have money from governments, but not from corporations.
Right.
And then gradually we understand corporations are okay too. So now people take money from corporations as well, so long as they are in the right business and the right industry. So for example, mining cannot be included.
Okay, so no mining.
No mining. But then you have borderline cases like Coca-Cola.
Yes.
So Coca-Cola, you can say, let's include taking them, money from them, helping them to do environment because they use less water. Or you can argue, the Coca-Cola, the sugar, the harmful impact,
Sure.
and
used to
all
use
the transportation of the stuff.
Yeah.
Something to debate as well. So this is an example of borderline cases. Another one is Air France KLM.
Oops.
Right? Air France KLM, 15 years ago, we have been a no. Today, some countries accept the ideas and some don't. So things actually do evolve.
Yeah, and the argument with the Air France KLM is the amount of fuel that they use.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and transport, especially airline transport.
CO2 and all that,
Yeah. So at this point for WWF, Air France KLM, yes.
Air France KLM, yes. If you are linked to Air France, like you're in France, WWF France, the WWF Netherlands is yes. The WWF somewhere else, you say no,
Yeah.
because you have the morals and the CO2, and no money for them as well.
Yeah.
Because while it's one global group, it's still very much split into different country entities, and they have a say on certain things up to a point, of course.
So there's a whole section in the book, and I think also in your memory, about royals. I mean, it's a chapter, royals. And I think for a lot of us, but I can't speak for all of us, the world of royal families is quite it's behind walls, and occasionally it appears on television, and every now and then they step out onto the street and they say hello and wonder what we're all doing in our lives. And what was the Eddie Izzard joke? Oh, you're a plumber. What on earth is that? And, it's supposed to be Prince Charles. Hello. There you are at WWF. Years are going by, and you're going to events, and you're sitting at tables with royals. I want to start off by asking the very basic. What's that like, or maybe better, what's going through your mind in those days?
It's actually very interesting because coming from the corporate world, you only see people who are like you. I will go to meetings, we all speak the same language, wear the same suit and tie, and we bore each other to death, right?
Yes.
But then, in the NGO world, I found that I was meeting people. One day it can be somebody in the field, field worker, can be a banker in Frankfurt, and can be the royals as well, which I never saw one in my life before.
Yes.
And the ones I came across are actually all very nice. Not only the royals, but even also the bankers and other people. But I think it's because the business has got a natural filter. Somebody who is interested in the environment is more likely to be a nice chap or woman than somebody who is interested in, drug smuggling or something else. So in that context, the royals fit in as the others fit in as well. But I put in a royal section in the book, especially because I want to sell my book also to the Americans and to the British.
They love that crap.
So that's where that section is. And I remember also when I first joined, my colleague says, "Oh, we have meetings in Buckingham Palace." I said, "No, you're kidding." I said, "So yeah, because Prince Philip is the president."
Right.
And I said, "Oh, that's interesting," because often you think they only lend the names, but he was actually very keen on the environment issue. And I recall my first meeting in the palace. I was in London at the Regent's Park Hilton. And I hailed a taxi. A black cab came. And "Where to, sir?" He said, "I say Buckingham Palace." He looked at me like, "You mean Buckingham Palace Road?" I said, "No, I mean Buckingham Palace, Like, you stupid tourists, So he took me to the palace, and it was very interesting.
But he figures you're going to stand outside with the rest of them, right? And just go.
True.
So he takes you to the gate.
He took me to the gate. He stopped there.
Yeah, have fun.
And then the guard looks at the list. And normally the meetings are about 7 or 10 of us, so it's quickly done. Then he will wave us through. And then suddenly I found myself walking into Buckingham Palace, from beyond the gate. And this is the palace I saw on television a million times, Queen this, Queen that. And it was actually very interesting.
Yes. And you got lost in there. We're not going to talk about that now, but it's documented how you got lost in the palace. But how does that work in the? I almost want to make like a pyramid or a pecking order. WWF in the 90s has Prince. I'm losing my princes. Prince Charles?
No, Prince Charles never.
Never.
Well, Prince Charles now. Prince Charles is now the patron of WWF UK.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but where is he on this scheme? Is he in charge? When do they send him out there, and where do they send him?
Okay. Well, it was founded in 1961, the NGO. When it was founded, the founders asked for the royalties to be involved because the idea is royalties attract people. So they went to ask Prince Philip to join, to be the first president. And he said he couldn't because he just joined the Royal Carriage Society as president.
So the second biggest.
Right. Never heard of them, yeah?
It's good to be
And they said, well, in that case, I recommend my friend, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands.
Oh, right.
So that's how Prince Bernhard became the first WWF president. And later on, having done so many terms, he then left. And then Prince Philip, having left his Carriage Society, then joined as the president of WWF International. So that's how the royals came in.
And then your job, you said, is to attract people.
The royals attract people which otherwise you wouldn't attract. So that's the whole idea. And I've seen examples, some of these big and powerful people, they can be very difficult and arrogant. The same people in Buckingham Palace after user, you know. Everybody is polite and very nice. And why not? And I also found the royals that I came across, they're all very nice people. They're all very nice people. And with a lot of humor. So my first fundraising dinner was in St. James Palace. And I remember Prince Philip walking up to talk to all these people. And he says, "Good evening, everybody. This is the WWF. And what do you think our mission is?" "I tell you," he says, "to give marvelous dinners at reasonable rates for you, the rich and famous," he says.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so
It's the chilies of the wealthy. But so the idea is that people, now you had mentioned earlier, which is interesting in the whole evolution of WWF, it was starting to be okay for not only governments but corporations to donate, and of course there's always individuals.
Sure.
And you said royals attract people. So the idea here is that the people that the royals attract are they're gonna buy the affordable dinner at different palaces.
or they donate as well. But one good example is when Prince Bernhard was the president of Netherlands, yeah?
Sure.
From the Netherlands, I mean. There was a Director General called Charles de Hayes who came from Rothmans Tobacco in South Africa. He was sent to Switzerland to raise money. And he founded this club called the 1001 Club. So the idea is one man and 1,000 other men are invited. So the one was Prince Bernhard. And 1,000 people were invited to pay $10,000 each, which is $10 million straight away. So Charles is a very good salesman. He flew around the world, and within 3 years, he enlisted 1,000 people and $10 million. Now, 3 years at 365 days a year, that's about 1,000 days. So Charles raised one person a day, $10,000.
Yeah.
That's quite a feat, you know.
Yeah.
So that club still exists, and here's one good example about how royals are able to raise money. Because if I did a 1001 club with me, you know, it's probably 1 and 1 club rather than 1,001 club. You know, so.
All right. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about when CY goes out into the field and the kinds of things that are, he encounters there. And we'll get into some other aspects about life and the work and much more. For those listening, this is Realities Podcast. We're at Studio Bar in Amsterdam, and we're talking with CY Chong, author of Life on Planet WWF, from archbishops to belly dancers. And we'll get into some of those characters when we come back. But so we're back with our conversation with CY Chong and the book Life on Planet WWF. I'm a fan of stories from traveling. I think you are too, actually. Mm-hmm. It shows. And at some point, you start to be the one that goes out into the field and gets to visit WWF projects, which, you can tell it better than me, but they seem to be quite amazing oftentimes.
I was hired because finance was in a mess, so I couldn't leave the office. But 2 years later, they were no more in a mess. Otherwise, I would be out, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So since they were no more in a mess, at least in the home office in Switzerland, then it was time to look at finances in the field. That's why from 2 years later, I started all these field visits, and I did it on a systematic basis, country by country, continent by continent. And of course, over the 20 plus years, I went to almost every country you can think of.
And when there was a problem, how was it described to you? We're sending money and money's disappearing, or we're supposed to be preserving a specific animal and it's not working? What were these problems?
One example can be money disappearing. You know, somebody stole money, for example, and those things do happen. Yeah. So if somebody stole money, or more boring, the reporting is not properly done, so then it becomes technical. But money stolen is then something more criminal. One example of money being stolen, for example, we had one case in Africa whereby normally the office manager doesn't go to the bank. He would then send his executants, people who run projects, to go to the bank, they get the cash to run the project. Because when you run projects in African jungles, you cannot send checks or use credit cards.
Not yet.
So it's all cash. So they get the cash themselves and they run the projects themselves. We had this one manager who went to all the other executants to collect all their checks so that he can then cash all the cash in one lump sum. And it was about $120,000 worth of cash. Then the cash never arrived at the office. So the interview by his manager to him was as follows. What happened to the money? He says, I went to the bank to cash all these checks, which he shouldn't have done in the first place. He got this $120,000 in his pocket. He then says he went home because his wife rang him to go home for a coffee. So he went home, right, with $120,000 in his pocket. Then while he was at home, this is what the guy said. The minister called him. I must see you, the minister said. So he then left his wife and the coffee to see the minister. So far, no problem. After the minister, he then said he felt hungry. So he went to the baker to buy something to eat, right? Imagine people telling this kind of story to you, no? Yeah. So he then took his car, parked his car and went to the baker, went to buy his cakes. He went back to his car and the money was gone. So after this incredible story,
Yeah.
And then the question was, did you lock the car? No, I didn't lock the car, he said. So very promptly he was taken by the police. So there's one example of the kind of stories. Yeah, but normally that would be the end, but even this wasn't the end. Then I flew down to that country and I went to see the lawyer. The lawyer then says to me, you wouldn't believe me. I said, what? He said, well, this guy was actually being silly. He wasn't being dishonest, he was just being silly. Because in their country, they have these witch doctors with a magic scheme. Double your money, like exactly like in Hollywood movies. You give them one stack Monday, Friday you do a bigger stack with newspapers in between. Yes. This is actually what happened.
Yes.
Anyway, this guy went to jail.
We had a New Yorker like that. His name was Bernie. You double your stacks of money. He's doing well now.
But this kind of things happen. So I go there and to try to recover the money, and often I do succeed. And we have other cases like we had one case in a place called Yokohama, which is in the forest, and a very remote office in the forest.
Of which country?
Yokohama is in Cameroon. Very remote, and there's a safe with money in there. And there were two guards at night. One was inside and one was outside sleeping in the compound. Three thieves or three robbers came, in fact, not even thieves, they were in the open. They tied up the guard inside. The guard outside didn't know because he was sleeping.
This is like a cartoon.
But they couldn't open the safe, so they left. Next day, they came back with three more friends, and they took the whole safe off.
Do you, I think a lot of us had heard stories over the years of people who are working in the corporate world, the corporate sector, and then feel the need to make a change. Maybe just not satisfied, or maybe, like you said, you want to do something new. Do you run into a lot of people of this tribe? And I'm curious what those conversations are like.
Actually, a lot. Yeah. Actually, a lot. I have examples that would arrive in a new office in London. Receptionist says, who are you? I say, here's my card. Oh, I'd like to work for you, she would say. It happened quite a few times. Not me, but the NGO itself. Or I would have lunch with bankers and they say, oh, it's nice that you actually work for a place with a mission rather than profit for profit's sake. So there's a lot of that.
But this was as true in the 90s. Do you find that it was as true then as it is now? Or?
Less in the 90s, more the last 10 years, I would say. In the early 90s, something like climate warming, global warming, most people don't even know about it.
But so is it a case of, so you see the card from WWF and someone will go, I want to work with you guys, and people may really mean it, right? But is this a case of, the grass is greener on the other side? Is the world of NGO work, was it for you, so different from the world of corporate work or any other?
I would say on the technical side, somewhat different. It's more demanding because it must have all this information that the corporate world doesn't need so much. Who the money went to. An example is auditing. Sometimes you have the internal audit, one set of audit, the Pricewaterhouse audit, the external audits, and the agency's auditors as well. So you have 3 set of auditors checking something, which you will normally not have in the corporate world. But then in the corporate world, you will have analysts looking at the numbers. Stock analysts, right? Newspapers, which you don't have in the NGO world.
Have these worlds become more similar in the last 2 decades, or have they veered off in very different directions?
I think it depends on the people in there and the mindset of the people in there. So some things that are similar, standard reporting is all the same, right? But mindsets can be very different. If you are into a profit at all costs environment, you behave one way. When you are trying to do something for the greater good, then you behave another way.
Hypothetical, or maybe not, but if you could work, or maybe be a fly on the wall even, at any NGO nowadays, who would you really like to be a part of and see what's going on in this world?
Probably something linked with refugees. Probably, yeah. Why I say that is very simple, because as the word refugees, you encompass a whole bunch of different people. The sick, the elderly, the children, the needy, and so on. Because any of us can be a refugee tomorrow. You never know.
Right.
Whereas WWF, for example, is already very narrow, right? Environment. Whereas refugees can include environment as well.
When you first got on the job, you present yourself, and I believe you, that you weren't an environmentalist outright. I'm not saying you didn't care for the environment, but it wasn't the number one thing on your mind.
I had no special interest.
Yeah.
I don't mean any harm, nor any good.
Right.
No special interest.
Right. While you're on the job, as time goes on, I know that we change with decades, and do you become an environmentalist?
Yes. My Jaguar is gone.
Sure. Step one.
Now I got a 2-seater Mercedes.
Yeah.
For example, right? And of course, many things are like that in life. When you don't know, you don't know. When you learn more, then you have sympathy and concern, which otherwise you may not have.
And so
that guy needs some training on environment.
Right. Yes. Wait 10 years, maybe 20. So at one point, which I found interesting, and I think we should all be so lucky one day, you got to sit at a table with perhaps not the only, but one of your childhood heroes, and that's Edmund Hillary.
True.
Speaking of Himalayas, there was Everest, right? He's famous for that. What is that conversation like? What did you talk about, and how do you start that conversation, really?
Well, going back first, when I was in school, we used to have these textbooks, explorers and things like this. And there was one photo, black and white, Edmund Hillary with eye goggles, on top of the mountain. And I found it fascinating. So somebody can climb up. And then years later, fast forward, I was having a lunch function.
Yeah.
I sat down and I saw, Hillary next to me,
Yeah.
And so from my photo, there's of this guy with the goggles and helmet.
Did you recognize him?
No. He was actually a very, very charming man, And my image was mountain climbing means no talking, right? Mind your own business.
Silence.
Yeah? Silence and just climb. But he was very, very friendly and very, very nice. And then I asked him, how was it like to climb the mountain? You say, oh, we went up there. But what did you do when you were up there?
Right, what do you do when you get to the top of Everest?
Which was a big energy to get up there. You say after 15 minutes, no more oxygen, we went down again. so then I learned one more lesson in life. It's a journey that counts. Destinations, once you're up there, you've done it.
You've got about 15 minutes.
But very, very nice man.
Yeah. And in the other kinds of meetings now, I think back to when you and I first met at the Sustainability Conference, as I mentioned before. Now, I got to meet people at these meetings. Sometimes they were good, and not just good people, I mean doing interesting work, and they meant it. And sometimes you know that, right? You meet someone and you know if they're passionate and they really mean it when it comes to, be it the environment or whatever it is they're doing, and you also know when someone's kind of, just talking, right? And now in this world of, let's call it corporate social responsibility, we know there's a lot of noise now, maybe more so than ever. The only trick is we sometimes notice that it's just noise, and we sometimes notice that it's for real, and we see actions, right? What do you make of it? Because I notice you're still going to these types of conferences. Where are we at? I mean, is it still a lot of lip service and show?
That's a good question, Mark. On a scale of 10, right? 10 being the best, if I put it that way.
Yeah.
You go back 15 years. Many big corporations have the environmental manager, which means an office in the basement next to the toilet.
Yeah.
So this was a 1 on a scale of 10. Today, I feel for many of these big corporations, it's maybe around 3 on a scale of 10. They make all the right statements, etc. Publicly, it's always wonderful. But when I have lunch with the manager on a one-to-one basis, they all say to me, yes, but, So I would say, so the bad news is only 3 out of 10. The good news is it went from 1 to 3. And still going. So I think the pressure should always be there. The change can only come, of course, from individuals, but also from corporations and governments. And people sometimes forget how important corporations are. I'll give you an example. In terms of endowment funds, WWF around the world has something like $200 million. This seems a lot, doesn't it? But it's actually nothing. The Harvard Endowment Fund alone has 20 times that.
The Harvard Endowment Fund. Now, what is it? You need to help me because my finances.
Sure.
An endowment fund.
Endowment funds are, if you like, reserve funds a company has or NGO has to make sure it will keep on running, or you use the interest to run expenses forever. What I'm trying to say is, one of the biggest NGOs in the world for the environment is 200 million. Seems a lot to a normal person. When the scale of things is actually nothing. One college endowment fund has 20 times that. This is only 1. Compared to one of the biggest players on the planet for the environment.
Yes.
You see what I'm trying to say here?
You can't do it alone. You need,
Right.
All right, lightning round. Lightning round.
Okay.
Most beautiful project you ever visited?
Most beautiful. Elephants. Now suddenly I think of that, elephants. I remember taking this walk, again in Africa, not Indian elephants. And after a drive, I took off my shoes, we had to walk along the stream. Then we walked along a narrow forest path, and I was feeling very worried myself. And then I saw a sign stuck to the tree trunk, It says, in case elephants attack, stand behind a tree and keep still.
In case elephants attack, stand behind a tree and keep still.
So then I was less relaxed, Then we walked a bit more, and then we came to a wooden platform on stilts. I went up there, and then I saw about 50 elephants, in a very wide area, and it was actually a very nice sight.
Was that, well, that's fairly scary anyway, but I want to ask about a scary moment when it comes to nature and, where you saw a sign and you thought, uh-oh. Was there ever a situation where you thought, hey, this is a little too much? These things this could be dangerous for me?
Yes, there was one. Another African trip I was in. I had this little room, like a hut. And when I went in there, I could hear monkeys. I thought this could be danger, but none of them came by. Then I went to have a coffee with some colleagues, and coffee was again on a platform on stilts next to a very wide, meandering river, and there were a lot of jungles and trees everywhere. Then we discussed Ebola.
Like you do.
Right? Even in those days,
Yeah.
So I say, where's Ebola? Because, oh, it's okay, not too far away.
Ebola is not too far away.
so,
Didn't come over today.
So I say, well, where is it? They say, well, 2 hours downstream. So that was a bit scary.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see it, but you can imagine.
Yes. You can imagine Ebola taking a boat
Right.
upstream. So if we look ahead now, we've got the book this year. You're still attending, for example, conferences on the topic of sustainability. What are your plans?
I still attend, but a bit less so.
Yeah.
A bit less so, yeah. So now I'm busy telling people with a book, so that takes a while. And maybe if it does well, I'll probably write a second book or a third book.
On the topic of?
Second book will be on how I think an NGO should be run, but from the positive angle. I wouldn't say, don't do this, don't do that. I would just say, this is how governance should be, how ABC should be, and so on. So there'll be possibly a second book.
Since we're talking about the book, were you keeping a journal on all these journeys and making notes, or was this all still in your head and you just had to get it down recently?
I actually have a good memory.
Yeah.
So there was no diary at all. All this came from memory. In fact, all these years I had no notes. So in the last few years, I decided to type. And of course, as you are typing on your computer, other memories come back. Then it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You go from 60 to 70, 80%, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. At some point, does someone call and say, hey, we heard you're writing a book. We need to know what this is about?
That's a good question, because when I was typing this, I remember things, I don't remember who said exactly what, and the key word is exactly, right? Yeah. I can say Mark said along the lines of general lines, but not every comma. Yeah. So I then said, should I then invent names, using real names? So I spent the first few pages inventing names, calling Jack Tom, calling Catherine, Isabel. In the end, I thought this is too tiring. So I deleted all those false names and put all the real names in.
Okay.
My daughter Natalie says, are you sure? Because they will sue you. So I said, US company, do first. Yeah.
Do first.
So and then I used all these real names, including what I remember that roughly what they said. So I put in what Prince Albert of Monaco said, what Prince Philip said, what this colleague and that colleague said, and see what happens next. Nothing happened next, but in between, colleagues were then asking me like, oh, what secrets are in your book, Jill?
Yeah.
So I then said, my friend, I've been there longer than you, right? I worked with 4 director generals, 6 operating managers, 5 treasurers. I know all the skeletons, but I wouldn't want to be the guy who puts all this out. So they are actually disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Right? The people like to read scandals.
They want scandals.
They want scandals. And then the opposite is actually people donate when they read my book. So they had the opposite in mind.
Yes.
And then when I actually had the book printed, I was a little bit hesitant. Who's going to complain now, right? So I sent 1 copy to the director generals. They all said they liked it.
Yeah.
I sent 1 copy to Prince Philip because he's quite featured in my book. Then I got a communication from the palace, Dear Mr. Chong, what's your mailing address? So I thought, oh, is this good news or bad news, right? Maybe it's good news because if it's bad news, they would then say, our lawyer needs your address.
Right. So if the royal palace wants your address directly, it could be a gift.
So then anyway, the mail came in, and I opened it, Balmoral Castle, And I got a long note like, thank you for the book. Thank you for all the good work you did in finance. And I flipped through your book. Not ready yet. I flipped through your book. It looks very entertaining. and then he signed by himself, which I thought was very nice of him.
And he told the truth instead of saying, I read the whole thing twice.
Then I called my public relations people in London. She then said, I'm going to put it on the back cover. I said, no, you can't do that, Helen, because this is the palace, personal letter. If I put it in, he'll be mad at me, and I know the palace don't like things done for commercial purposes, so it's not him. Yeah.
You know the ins and outs of protocol, I see.
I don't know.
So we have a studio audience, and I want to make sure that people who have something that I've no doubt missed, because I'm very capable of that, but does anyone have something that they would really like to ask that I perhaps missed out on?
I was just wondering what actually made you write the book? Like, how did I'm going to write a book come up? Was it something you were asked to do? Was it something you thought of for some reason?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
I often get asked this question. It's actually very simple, because when you're working there 20 plus years, every few months something happens, right? When something happens, and I'm having lunch with Mark. I say, oh, Mark, you know what happened? And I tell him what happened, you see? And by the way, what happened last week? And then Mark then says, oh, all these interesting stories, why don't you write a book?
Right.
So when I hear it 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, I say, yeah, why not write a book? But I want one golden rule. If I don't feel like it, I don't even open my computer. So it was all done whenever I felt like it. Because my logic is, if you don't have pleasure writing it, people have no pleasure to read it as well.
You mentioned reporting, and that is very important,
right,
because that's how you get your money. But I've also heard in the field of NGOs that there's too much reporting going on, that it's an overload of reporting, and that people are writing so much you can't get anything done, kind of thing. And I wonder if did you see that kind of unbalance? Was it that you thought your projects were not getting done because they had to write too much?
Not in my experience, because many of the people, they like just to do their thing, don't bother me with the reports, you see. Whilst they are right, they're also wrong, because you are the donor now, you gave $100,000, nothing comes back as a report to you, right? You're not very confident you're going to give any more money.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to proper reporting, money went here, there for A, B, and C. The executives thing, trust me, I'm going to do it properly, leave it to me. You can't leave it to you, there are systems in place.
So is that communicating side, is that what's also in the future? Is that super important then for NGOs to communicate their work?
I think they have to all the time, because reporting is not just reporting, actually making sure that the donor feels comfortable the money has been properly spent, rather than going to a black hole, right? Trust me and give me the money and we see. And as far as auditors are important too, because reported and audited.
You mentioned earlier about with the Edward Hillary stuff that the summit is indeed only 15 minutes before you need to go back on. Are you still climbing a professional mountain, you think, or are you nearing your professional summit? Are you still got bigger things that you're going towards? Are you just sort of taking a break?
When I was in my corporate days, we were told these stories I remember very well, Like one of these people who gave training. This guy went up his corporate ladder, step by step. One day he arrived at the top, opened the door, and found there was nothing inside. So for me, the key is not so much the corporate ladder or the whatever ambition. It's more to live your life having something to do that makes sense for you, whether it's writing a book, having a chat with all of you, and go on the process. So, a la Hillary, the journey.
And the journey continues.
Yes.
All right, well, I think we'll stop there for today. I want to make sure, of course, CY Chong, thanks so much for being here, for coming to Amsterdam and sharing this time with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Well, I enjoyed chatting with all of you.
And also, of course, want to thank Studio Bar and Joachim and Karin and Seaton and Adrian also for all the work that you guys have put in. And you, the studio audience, for being here. And, of course, all the people listening at home. Thanks so much.
You're listening to the inaugural episode of Realities Podcast, and that was C.Y. Chong live in Amsterdam talking about his new book, Life on Planet WWF. If you'd like to get a copy, you can either remember to Google C.Y. Chong, Life on Planet WWF, or you can follow the link that is attached to today's post on realitiespodcast.com. If you're into Facebook, you can find us there, Realities Podcast. On Twitter, I'm going to keep using my usual handle. Many of you already know it, Bicycle Mark. Mark is with a K. And let's see, any other relevant? Oh yes, we're on YouTube. If you enjoy YouTube, you usually turn on a playlist. That is also an option for Realities Podcast. One last request before I head off into the sunset. It's a new podcast, so subscribe. Whatever you use, I like Pocket Casts, my favorite program on my phone and on my computer. But perhaps you like something else like iTunes. I'm also there under Realities Podcast. But you definitely want to subscribe, and we'll be back next week with another program, another interview. There won't be live podcasts necessarily, but they will be interesting, lively, and diverse in terms of topics. So if you like to learn about the world and individuals, how they do what they do, why they do what they do, that is what I will be busy bringing to you as often as possible, hopefully on a weekly basis. All right, until next time, I'm Mark Fonseca Rendeiro. Thanks for listening. See ya.
You're television incarnate, Diana. Indifferent to suffering, insensitive to joy. All of life is reduced to the common rubble of banality. War, murder, death. All the same to you as bottles of beer. And the daily business of life is a corrupt comedy. You even shatter the sensations of time and space into split seconds and instant replays. You're madness, Diana.